All right, welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Trust TV, and now time for us to take a look at the next discussion on the program. After years of mixed progress and setbacks for democratization, Africa needs stronger institutions in building the more democratic, effective governance vital to stability and pace for its 1.4 billion people, the world's fastest growing population. Nigerians, nearly one-sixth of all Africans, will choose a new president this weekend in what may be Africa's most consequential elections of 2023. But central to the demand amidst the campaigns is inclusion for persons with disability. We'll be talking about this, and we have in the studio Jacob Pele, the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Tafrica, formerly the Albino Foundation, to talk to us about inclusion as we approach the election in a few days. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Daybreak. All right. Well, let's talk about the Electoral Act and persons with disability. Yeah, we've seen certain reforms. A lot of people are optimistic that quite a lot is going to change this time around. To what extent did the Electoral Act take into consideration persons with disability, and whether or not we are going to see that implemented in this election?
Well, thank you. A couple of years ago, we started the advocacy for inclusion of disability in the electoral process, specifically the Electoral Act. It was a Herculean task, but we succeeded. Previously, in Electoral Act 2010, Section 56, subsection 1 and 2, there was a surface inclusion. I'll say that, and so a particular clause, subsection 2, says that INEC may reasonably include persons with disability in the process. I'm paraphrasing it, not quoting exactly. And when we saw that, we knew that that's a tokenism. It's like doing us a favor. And so we started the advocacy for a repeal of that draconian clause and a replacement of a better clause, a more inclusive clause, a more mandatory clause. And thank God we succeeded in 2022. So 2022 Electoral Act is the most inclusive Electoral Act in the history of Nigeria. And Section 54, subsection 1 and 2, gave impetus to inclusion and compelled INEC to tow the path of inclusion. And I dare say that Professor Mahmoud in particular and his entire management have become champions of inclusivity. And so for the first time, I can beat my chest to say we may achieve 60-65% inclusion in this particular process. And I say that because of the various elective materials that will not be available during this particular exercise. But it's a far improvement from where we're coming from. Okay. So I will say that, yes, we will achieve minimally 65% inclusion.
Okay, so what are some of the things, can you run us through some of the things that have been included to ensure a seamless voting exercise for people in this category?
I never fail to tell my story. My story is simply that I didn't participate in the electoral process. I didn't vote. I wasn't interested until I was 58. And now I'll be 61 in May. And so you see, within 3 years, a lot has changed. And I didn't because the process was not conducive, And to answer your question, what has changed? One, there is now priority voting, which puts me and my community first in the line to vote. The entire persons with disability now secures the right to vote first. There are assistive voting materials. Like in my days, by the way, I can't stand in the sun for more than 10 minutes. I get burnt. And of course, consistent burning will result to skin cancer. I'm a skin cancer survivor. I've had one surgery at my back. So there are a number of assistive materials that INEC has procured, and I'm thankful because it wasn't actually in their budget, so they bent backward to make sure that they have that provision. One is the magnifying glasses for persons with albinism. That means if you go to the polling unit and you're listening to me, demand for those magnifying glasses. And when you're giving, of course, you know how to use it. Use the light, run it through the ballot paper, and vote a candidate of your choice. I repeat, vote a candidate of your choice. Neither me or anybody should not tell you who to vote. Who to vote is your right. The choice is yours. The political party to vote is your right. The choice is equally yours. So then for the blind, there are two opportunities. Number one opportunity is that the blind will be led by his or her aides, as long as you introduce your aide to the presiding officer. And let me also speak to security operatives. This is our constitutional, no, not constitutional, an electoral right, because it's in the Electoral Act. Okay, so allow them, when you see them, one aide to a person who is blind. That fellow will lead the blind to the presiding officer, and the presiding officer will do two things. You will provide the Braille ballot guide with the ballot paper. The blind voter, eligible voter, not every blind, will insert the Braille ballot paper into the guide, and that automatically turns that process into a Braille. And so the blind will run his finger to the particular political party that he wants to vote and then thumbprint. Your aide must not tell you who to vote. It is absolutely yours. Now, we also know that there are certain demography of the blind that cannot read the Braille.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, just before you proceed, I want you to hold your thoughts. We'll take a short breather, and then when we return, you pick it up from where you stop. Please join us again.
Hi, my people, reason this thing now.
When PDP day,
Our country be shake, Naira strong, economy they grow, fuel 7 naira, rice 8,000.
our life in better. Oh,
When change people come,
no work, no food, economy for gutter. Naija borrow, boundary tree foot down, japa left and right, sapa up and down. No need to gamble,
say joy,
PDP don't come,
say joy,
recover Naija,
say
we
joy,
don't tire to suffer,
say joy,
experience mind,
say
we
joy,
don't want experiment,
say joy,
get am right,
say joy,
this time our life, oh,
say joy,
recover Nigeria,
say joy,
Atiku na the man, oh,
say joy,
Atiku Onokowa,
say joy,
na the only choice, oh,
say joy.
Vote the safe choice to recover Nigeria.
PDP.
Power to the people.
Now, PDP Presidential Campaign Council sponsored this message.
All right, thank you for staying with us. We have in the studio Jake Pele, the Chief Executive Officer and founder Tafrika, formerly the Albino Foundation, talking to us about inclusion for persons with disability in the coming election in a few days. Well, thank you so much, Jake, for being with us on Daybreak. There am I going again with Africa. So
maybe you're going Africa.
well, that's one of the programs I anchor actually. So,
okay.
it always comes to my mouth, somehow. You were talking about those who are unable to read the Braille and are visually impaired. Yeah.
The blind. Now, there's nothing wrong saying the blind. It's the right terminology. For us who are low vision, we're visually impaired. Now, so if you are a blind, again, I use eligible voter. It's not for every blind. That means you are 18 years above and you have your PVC. If you do not have your PVC, you're not going to vote in this exercise. So you need your PVC, go to the polling unit, go through accreditation process. Once you do that, automatically you can vote. Previously, you will go through accreditation and then stand by, and no, that has changed. As you get accredited, you then can vote immediately. So if you're the blind that cannot read the Braille, once you go through the accreditation process, that's going through the BIVA, the process of the VIVA, where you place your hands, and for any reason, maybe you're a person with leprosy and you don't have a hand, you can do with your limb. If you're a person with albinism and they couldn't read your iris, which is usual, they would take your facial expression, so their facial recognition, so they can use thumbprint, they can use the iris, they can use facial expression, and that's what the beavers are. And for heaven's sake, the beavers are the best thing that has happened to this electoral process. Do not think that the beavers, as a matter of fact, those who are condemning the beavers are afraid, because the beavers will avoid automatically the issue of rigging. You
sound very optimistic about the whole process. However, it's one thing to have a law, it's another for it to be implemented, the latter. So we are talking about over 176,000 polling units here. And so when it comes to implementing some of those provisions as regards persons with disability, do you have any concern as to maybe insensitivity from the part of other people?
I have too many concerns, but I've always been an upbeat person. I've always been a very optimistic person. I'm also a realist. I'm not dismissing or in denial. Somebody says, look at me sometimes and say, oh, but you're not, well, like they say, you're not an albino, which is a derogatory term, or you're not a person with albinism. Give me a break, I am. And I'm very proud that I'm a person with albinism. I have no problem with that. You don't live in denial trying to make good a cause, And so, yes, there are countless problems. Like the magnifying glasses are not going to go to all the polling units, and that again because of one, the issue of data. We do have a dashboard that is supporting INEC to identify where there are clusters of persons with disability across the country. If I have the dashboard and you tell me your state, you tell me your local government, tell me your ward, I can pull information in your ward and present it to
But
you.
why
And
would-
I think you guys should actually have us to.
But when we talk
demonstrate
about,
the dashboard.
but when we talk about INEC and maybe security operatives doing their part, to what extent will you say the people in this category were educated on all of this before now?
We have been doing this for years. I've been doing this for 17 years. It's not enough because of the limited resources. It's not enough, I admit. But my people are very well sensitized to a great extent. You know, if you ask me to quantify it, I probably would say 40%. You know, again, I'm very careful with numbers. One, because of the position I occupy, I don't want to be quoted wrongly. So the sensitization has been going on, and we try to be strategic the way we work. I'm not going to base our effort on just mere sensitization. We've gone to the next level of ensuring that there are adequate guidelines and laws and policies to drive it, because I'm getting old, and if I exit tomorrow, other people can continue because there is a sustainability process, and those are my thing. For me, there are guidelines. We identified a number of drivers of inclusion in the electoral process. All right. Number one is the citizen. Everyone, you are a driver of inclusion. That's why you invited me this morning. The media, the media is a huge driver of inclusion. The electoral bodies, you know, we're not just working with INEC. I'm also a grassroots person. I'm working with a number of states. Sokoto State, for instance, Cross River, Plateau. We're working with a number of states to address the issue of inclusion in their own sub-national democracy, which is at the state level. And so the sensitization has been going on, will continue. The community of persons with disability are brought to the table.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that also takes me to another point here, talking about this PWD's Act at the subnational level and implementation and all that. Yes, we have all this, but how much have we done since the law was passed, you know, at the subnational level?
The law is just recent, not too long ago. I think 2018
December.
Yeah. So in terms of implementation, it takes a gradual process, you know, especially when you're dealing with a very fragile economy like that of our country, you know. The first and landmark implementation achievement based on the Prohibition Act is the establishment of the National Commission for Persons with Disability. You know, that's a huge implementation strategy. And that organ, being also a government organ, drives issues of implementation at government level, at the governmental level. Of course, you have organizations like ours and several others who are at the forefront of driving the implementation. But it will take some measure of strategic advocacy and funding for us to have a reasonable implementation. But the National Commission is doing her best, led by my very good friend James, and several other organizations that are driving the implementation. Your invitation to me this morning is part of the Act's implementation. You know, it hasn't been, it's not easy, it's not perfect, but we are surely better than where we're coming from. You know, and I am one of the people that I'm not afraid to criticize this government. But if one thing that I can say that Buhari would go home as a legacy is his one, assent to the Electoral Act, which is inclusive, his assent to the Discrimination Act, his establishment of the National Commission for Persons with Disability, and for that, Mr. President, I say kudos.
Okay.
All right.
But there are several other things you need to fix.
Okay. Now let's talk about consequences for violation of some of these provisions. So in the Electoral Act, for instance, you talked about some of the provisions that have been made. So, for instance, as maybe a person with disability goes to the polling unit, and for some reason he is not given that priority. What happens?
Oh no, that's that's a very good reason to go to court, because it's a law. And I don't think INEC has addressed that issue squarely with all their ad hoc staff. Even yesterday, the chairman addressed the issue and even went further when I asked him a question about what happens if a person on a wheelchair does not have access to the polling unit. And I made a suggestion, which he approved on the spot, and said, listen, let us agree that all the political party agents, the security operative, INEC presiding officer, will then be approached by that individual, okay? And then the polling unit will be brought down to where the person is, and he will vote, and collectively it is taken back to where it is previously located. That's a huge inclusion, reasonable accommodation step. Now, Nigeria is not the first to do it. I've seen it in the US, I've seen it done in Germany, I've seen it done in Kenya. So we are not the first. But thank God we have joined the queue of countries that will do that. And I'm going to particularly look out on Saturday, the implementation. So yes, to answer your question, not only that, we are also observing and looking for loopholes, not with the intention to use the sledgehammer, no, but with the intention to ensure that where we can get remedy, we will seek redress.
All right. I see that there are efforts to ensure that people with PWC in this category are able to vote. But I don't see a lot of participation in seeking elective positions by people in this category. Who is reluctant? Is it the political parties reluctant to adopt these people, let them seek elective position, or is the reluctance coming from the people themselves?
There's actually an increase. There's actually an increase in the
How will you rate
persons with disability.
What's the percentage?
I'll give you numbers. 34 persons will contest. I think there's 2 for Senate, 8 for House of Representatives. I don't have the accurate figure, but there's a lot for for State House of Assembly. But you see, I love political leadership. I try to teach when I have the time. I have been pushing my community, because leadership is always bottom top. It's not top bottom. And that's one of the bane of some of the things you're seeing even in Nigerian democracy. People who are not qualified to lead, maybe because of privileged position that they are seen in leadership position, and then you get there, you don't have what it takes to sustain the position. So I think one of the things that we need to do in this country is what I call reinvention of leadership, reinventing leadership, but that's not the subject for the day. So there are persons with disability who are going to contest, but I've been pushing them to focus more on local government election. Go to the councillor, go as chairman, and grow your political pedigree.
How does that even happen? I mean, we know how the political landscape is in Nigeria. We talk about issues of funding sometimes as a challenge, issues of godfatherism as a challenge, you know. So, and you find that even in some states, at some subnational level, these local councils are virtually almost non-existent, politically speaking, because they are, quote unquote, in the hands of the governor. So,
well, many governors are becoming very compassionate. My friend, the Sokoto State governor, and several other governors, you know, are becoming very inclusive, you know, and they're listening. And so, if you look at life generally, you will notice that people don't succeed very well where it's crowded. You hardly would succeed where there are too many competition. You actually have many better chances where there are less competition. And for me, the local government has less competition compared to coming to House of Representatives.
Some people may say that local government election is tough. It's in some cases tougher than even the state.
Not as tough, because oftentimes we conclude that the governors hijack it. You understand? It could be an assumption, but where you do your work well, like the kind of work we've done presently with Sokoto State government, you know, by giving them an electoral guideline that is transparent, that is inclusive, that is affordable for the community of persons with disability. For instance, a person without disability will buy their forms at 300,000. A person with disability will buy their form for 25,000. That's a huge achievement, you know. So, oftentimes they say assumption is the lowest form of reasoning. Let's not assume. Let's get into the process.
But is it really assumption?
And if it's wrong, correct.
We've heard from people who have participated in these processes. So, and we ourselves are watching. So it's not like, you know, it's assumed.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that what you said is an assumption. I'm just saying generally, it's a general postulations that oftentimes, you know, but I'm not saying what you said is an assumption.
Okay. All right. A lot of people will say local government election is actually the true test of popularity, of your popularity.
Not only that, it's also the grassroots entrenchment of democracy. Democracy, the beauty of it is when everyone from bottom to top participates. A democratic process that is exclusive is an absolute rape on democracy.
All right. So to what extent will inclusivity impact the quality of governance of a country?
There is no governance without inclusivity. Absolutely. It's a charade. There is no governance without. What makes a holistic governance is that everybody is part of the process. You're not doing me a favor by giving me the process to vote. It's my right. I'm a citizen of the country. Yes, I may have challenges, but the challenges does not affect my brain. The challenges doesn't make me less human. You know, everyone have one challenge or the other. The president wear glasses. That's a challenge. The president is not ill. Once in a while he goes for treatment. That's a challenge. Everyone has a challenge. The cameraman in the studio, if he misses the angle of his lens, that's a challenge. If the data that drives the carriage of your programs fails, that's a challenge in itself. So everyone have one challenge or the other. Is your ability to manage it and bring that difference to the table to make a better society, to make a better inclusive society.
There was this GAIN document recently that was put together. It contained recommendations by people in this group, recommendations of things that they expect from elected leaders. And it was given to some candidates to sign in the FCT, and they were going to send it to states to sign. Do you actually believe in such documents?
Oh yeah, any step taken by, and you're talking about my good friend Grace of Inclusive Friends, any step taken by anybody to increase participation of persons with disabilities is a welcome development. You know, to me, what is presented as gain is social contract. And any reasonable leader who truly wants to lead, who wants to lead from the grassroots, should be able to sign such. Or just like today there's a peace accord that's going to be signed. All right. So for me as an individual, I've been speaking with many of them on the public fora, not privately. I don't respond to any of their invitation because I'm strictly apolitical. You know, I don't. And I've gotten invitation from many of the candidates. I didn't attend.
Okay, so to be more specific, what could be some of the expectations of persons with disability from the coming government?
Well, tell us what you have, one, that will give us access to social services. Social services like quality education. You know, in this country, there should be free education from nursery to university for every person with disability. We can afford it. We can afford it, you know. Two, quality to access to quality health, you know. For instance, many persons with albinism are dying of skin cancer, you know. Access to social services. Social services I've mentioned, like, you know, social protection ventures, social protection of persons with disability economically. You know, there is a central bank guideline or policy on financial inclusion. How many persons with disability have benefited from that? There's always a say that we have too many policies, which I believe we should have as many policies as possible. And somebody say, oh, well, there's no implementation. Let's keep struggling to implement. It is always better to have policies and you're struggling to implement than no policies at all. You know, so we need that. We need participation in the cabinet. I confronted one or two of the presidential candidates, and I asked them publicly on a live television town hall, and I said, if you win, will you appoint persons with disability in your cabinet as first line minister? Not anything first line. Yes, like we have SA and all that. We're tired of having SA. Why can't we become ministers? You know, why can't we become vice president? Why can't we become Senate president? Is there anything stopping us from being the Speaker of the House?
All right.
Those things are possible where there is a will.
All right. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, because of time, we have to go. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak this morning. Jacob Pele is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Tafrica, formerly the Albino Foundation. We appreciate you joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your management for inviting me.
You're welcome. All right then, so this brings our show to a close for today. In case you've missed, you can always catch us across all social media platforms and also on our YouTube live stream. My name is Ayuba Ila. Let's do this again tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Join us same time, same station tomorrow. My name is Stella Iyaji. For now, do have a very pleasant day.